If you've ever had that sinking feeling that someone less experienced than you is earning more than you, you're probably right. And it's not because you're not good enough, it's because you're playing by a set of rules that the highest paid executives abandoned years ago. After 20 years in professional services and now coaching hundreds of professionals through major career moves, I've seen a very clear pattern. The people who earn the most aren't always the most talented. They just understand 5 things about how people get paid that most hardworking professionals never learn. So, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what those 5 things are, so you can stop leaving money on the table and start being paid what you're actually worth. We were trained to believe that if you work hard, deliver results, and stay loyal, then the money follows. But at senior levels, that's simply not how it works. The people earning the most have figured out a completely different game, and if you don't learn the rules, you'll end up underpaid, under-recognized, and increasingly frustrated. So I learned this lesson myself the hard way. When I was climbing the ranks in professional services, I did exactly what most ambitious people do. Put my head down, delivered excellent work, and assumed that the system would reward me fairly. And for a while it did, but there came a point when I looked around and realized that some of the people earning the most, including people I was working alongside, weren't necessarily better at the work. They were better at something else entirely. They understood how to position themselves, how to make their value more visible, and how to have conversations about money that I was actively avoiding because it felt awkward. And that was a difficult thing to accept, because I'd spent years believing that great work speaks for itself. But it doesn't, not at senior levels. Great work just gets you to the table. But what you earn at that table depends on a completely different set of skills. And once I understood that, and once I started applying these principles myself and then with other people that I coach, I saw the same pattern play out time and time again. People who'd been stuck on the same package for years suddenly making moves that increase their compensation by 20, 30, 50%. Not because they got better at their jobs, but because they got better at these 5 things. And that's what I want to share with you today, because compensation at senior levels isn't a reward for past performance. It's a reflection of how well you've positioned yourself for future value. Okay, so the first rule is all about market value. So most professionals measure their worth by what their current employer pays them, whereas executives measure their worth by what the market would pay them. And those are completely different numbers. Your current salary isn't a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of the last negotiation you had, or more likely the negotiation that you didn't have, because it's anchored to your starting salary and then adjusted by annual increments. It has very little to do with what someone with your skills and experience could command today. So you need to know your number, not your current number, your market number. Talk to headhunters, even if you're not looking. Look at competitor job specs. Speak to peers at similar levels in other organizations and get a realistic picture of what someone with your profile is worth externally. The mistake is assuming that your company already knows your market value and is paying you accordingly. They're not. They're paying you based on what they can get away with in their internal pay scales, and those 2 numbers can be wildly different. I worked with a director at a major bank who hadn't moved companies in 8 years, and she was earning a base of 145k. And when we mapped her market value based on her skills, her sector experience, and her seniority, the external market rate was closer to 190k. So she'd been leaving 45k a year on the table simply because she'd never really checked. Now, knowing your market value is essential, but it's useless if no one can see why you're worth it, which brings us to rule 2. You have to make your value visible, not just valuable. So this is the big one. High earners don't just do great work, but they make sure that the right people know about it. Not in a self-promotional or annoying look at me sort of way, but in a strategic, deliberate way. At senior levels, the people who decide your compensation often aren't the people who see your daily work. They're 2 or 3 levels above you. They're on the boards and committees. And their perception of your contribution is based on what they hear about you, not what they see directly. So you need what I call a value narrative. This isn't a CV, it's a clear, specific story of the commercial impact that you've had. And let me show you exactly what I mean. Most professionals, when asked what they do, say something like, I run the risk and compliance function for the investment banking division. That's a job description. It tells somebody your title, it doesn't tell them your value. A value narrative sounds more like, over the past 3 years, I've redesigned the compliance framework for our investment banking division, which reduced regulatory incidents by 40% and saved the firm an estimated £20 million in potential fines, and enabled us to onboard a new class of client that was previously outside our risk appetite. I also built and now lead a new team of 12 people that didn't exist when I started. So the same person, same role, completely different impact. So here's how to build yours. Think about 3 things. What problems have you solved? What have those solutions been worth commercially? And what would have happened if you hadn't been there? When you can answer those 3 questions clearly, you've got your value narrative. And then share it. In one-to-ones, in leadership team meetings, in conversations with sponsors. Not bragging, just making sure that your contribution isn't invisible. The biggest trap is believing that good work speaks for itself. And at junior levels, maybe it does, but at senior levels, silent excellence is invisible excellence. And invisible excellence doesn't get rewarded. Now here's where it gets interesting, because even when you're visible, most people make a critical mistake with how they think about compensation itself. So the third rule here is to negotiate your role, not just your salary. So most people just negotiate their salary. Executives negotiate on scope. They understand that the single biggest lever for compensation isn't arguing for a few extra percent on your current package, it's reshaping the role itself so it commands a higher package. When you think about it, there's a ceiling on what any given role pays. So if you're in a role where the salary band tops out at 145k, no amount of negotiation will get you to 180k in that same box. But if you expand the scope of your role, if you take on a larger team, a bigger P&L, a cross-functional mandate, a more strategic brief, whatever it is, you're no longer in the same box. You've moved into a different bracket entirely. So how do you do this? Before your next conversation about compensation, ask yourself, what responsibilities could I take on that would make this role worth more? What problems exist in this organization that no one is currently owning? Or where is there a gap that aligns with my strengths? Then propose expanding your role to fill the gap, and the compensation will then follow. But here's what to avoid. Don't just ask for more money for the same job. That's a weak position. Instead, redefine the job and then ask for the package that fits the new scope. A client of mine was a regional sales director in fintech, and she was earning about 150k. And she'd actually been passed over twice for VP. She was really frustrated. So instead of lobbying for the VP title, she actually proposed creating and leading a new cross-regional strategic accounts function. Something the company needed, but nobody had owned. 6 months later, she was VP of Strategic Accounts with a package worth 210k. She didn't negotiate a raise, she negotiated a role. But even with the right role and the right visibility, there's a fourth thing that separates the highest earners from everything else. So the fourth rule is all about building strategic relationships, not just a network. So what do I mean by this? Well, the highest paid executives have sponsors, not just contacts. And there's a huge difference between having a network, which is people who know your name, and strategic relationships, which are people who advocate for you when you're not in the room. This matters because compensation decisions at senior levels are not usually made by your direct manager alone. They're made in leadership team meetings, talent reviews, and promotion committees. And the people in those rooms are deciding based on what they've heard from people that they trust. So how do you do this? Identify 2 or 3 people in your organization or in your industry who have influence over the kind of opportunities that you want. Not just people that you get along with. These are the people who have the power to open doors, to make introductions, or advocate for you if they're in your current company. And then invest in those relationships deliberately. Share your ambitions with them. Ask for their advice. Make it easy for them to champion you. But here's what to avoid. Don't confuse being well-liked with being well-sponsored. Lots of senior professionals have great reputations, but a reputation without a sponsor is like a billboard in the desert. It's impressive, but nobody's going to see it. So for example, when I was going through the partner promotion process at KPMG, I didn't actually get it first time around. And I realized that was because it was only my direct boss who knew and supported me, who was on the leadership team, that was making the decisions. So over the next year, I made it my business to get to know 2 other senior members of the leadership team who I didn't directly work with. And they ended up sponsoring me, and the following year I got promoted. Now, those first 4 rules are all about what you do within your current environment. But the 5th rule is all about something most professionals refuse to even consider. And it's often the most powerful lever of all. So rule 5 is you need to be willing to move and make sure everybody knows about it. So the highest paid executives always have options. And more importantly, the people who decide their compensation know they have options. This isn't about threatening to leave, it's about having genuine alternatives and the confidence that comes from knowing you could walk away. This matters because most employers will just pay you the minimum they need in order to keep you. That's not personal, it's just how companies work. But if they know you've got a credible alternative, if they sense that you're genuinely in demand elsewhere, then the calculation changes for them. And suddenly retaining you becomes a priority, and priority gets rewarded. So how do you do this? Well, stay active in the market, even if you're not looking to move. Take headhunter calls, have conversations with competitors, keep your LinkedIn profile up to date, not because you're planning to leave, but because having genuine options gives you leverage and confidence in every conversation that you're going to have about your pay. Don't make the mistake of becoming so comfortable or so fearful of change that you lose your optionality entirely. When you have no alternatives, you've got no leverage. And when you've got no leverage, you're completely at the mercy of whatever your current employer decides to pay you. I've seen this a few times. Someone comes to me feeling stuck, underpaid, and frustrated. And when I ask, what are your options? They say, I'm not sure. And that's the problem. Not that they need to leave, but that they've stopped exploring. So the moment you start building real alternatives, even just understanding what's out there, your confidence will increase. and people around you will feel it. You'll carry yourself differently. You'll be negotiating from a different place because you'll be making those decisions from a position of strength rather than from a place of fear. And that changes everything about how you're paid. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds a bit like playing politics. I just want to do good work and be fairly rewarded. And I hear you. And honestly, I felt exactly the same way for years. But here's what I've learned. This isn't politics. It's just being professional. And there's a difference. This is just about making sure that your contribution is seen, your values understood, and that your ambitions are known. That's not playing games, that's just being strategic about your career. Or maybe you're thinking, I'm too far into my career to change how I do things now. What that actually means is you're at the right stage. Because at your level, even small shifts in how you position yourself will have an enormous financial impact. We're not talking about starting over, we're talking about making your existing experience and expertise work much harder for you. So the question isn't whether these principles apply to you. The question is, what's the cost of another year of not applying them? Start by applying these 5 rules and position yourself for the compensation that you actually deserve. But here's the thing, none of this is going to matter if you end up in a role that pays you more but drains the life out of you. I've seen that happen too many times. Someone makes a brilliant move on paper, gets a significant pay rise, and within 6 months, they're miserable because their daily work is completely wrong for them. So don't let that happen to you. Watch this video next, where I show you a simple framework for finding the work you should do and that you'll also get well paid for. You know you're going to both enjoy it and get paid well. I'll see you there.